My name is Bobby Thandi. I'm the founder and CEO of XR Games. We're an award-winning game studio focusing on VR games. Since 2017, I've raised millions of dollars across numerous investment rounds. Today, I'd like to talk about what to expect when raising funding for your game studio. My presentation is split across the following sections. Where do you start? What do you need to get ready before investment? What to expect during the process? And finally, red and green flags regarding potential investors. I'm going to assume you already have a game studio or a startup, meaning you have what I like to call the Golden Triangle Foundation, meaning you have at least two other friends to go on this venture with. One person takes care of all things tech, the second person takes care of all things creative, and the third person takes care of all things business. A game studio simply doesn't exist without all three areas covered off. And unless you're an insanely talented lone developer who can handle creative, tech, and business, or you're already very rich, you're going to need to raise dollars for your game studio. So where do you start? Whenever you start anything for the first time in life, you're starting with a blank piece of paper. This can be both scary, where do I start? And wonderful, this is the start of something amazing. Personally, I start with answering why. Why am I doing this? I imagine most of you have probably heard of this book. If not, I strongly recommend reading it. Because in business, it doesn't matter what you do, it matters why you do it. I once heard running a startup is like being repeatedly punched in the face, punctuated with intense highs on a daily basis. To take the lows and to get back up from being punched in the face, you need a very strong why. So what is your purpose, cause, or belief that will give you the energy, passion, and resilience to brush off defeats and rejections? Because with your why, you can get knocked down 9 times and have the strength to get up 10 times. I'll now explain my why. I used to work on a market stall as a kid, and with my earnings, I bought Bubble Bobble, which was the first game that I completed with my mate Steve. Neither of us had ever finished a game before, and it was euphoric to complete this game. Bubble Bobble is a 2-player cooperative game, and nothing pleased me more than just managing to finish a level and turning to my friend for a high-five celebration, or a quick playful punch in Steve's ribs if he messed up. Playing a game and sharing in the fun with a friend in real life was what made gaming so special for me. So much so that when I was the vice president of digital at Dubbit, the previous game studio that I worked at, which focused on children's games, I went out and secured the Masha and the Bear IP, as my kids loved that animation series. And then I set about making a cooperative game that would enable my kids to play together at the same time on the same tablet, as I wanted them to share in the love of co-op gaming like I did. Also, it's been downloaded over 1 million times, which I'm very pleased with, as over 1 million households have got to enjoy co-op gaming. So when I first tried the VR when I first tried VR, I found a technology that would enable people to play together digitally better than ever before, because we are now inside the game, and the sense of presence in the game enables you to do virtual high fives and share in the joy and pain of winning and losing. And this would be possible regardless of where we were in real life, especially as my friends are now scattered all across the globe. So that's my why. I want to make games about playing together, and VR gives me the perfect platform for this. From that eureka moment, XR Games' mission statement was born. It's through play that people make some of their most meaningful and lasting memories, especially with friends and family. XR Games exists to make games that create those moments. This purpose, our why, is what drives us to excel in the games we make. And if we feel we're not quite there in terms of making a game that will create lasting memories because they're so much fun to play, we'll go back to the drawing board. I've banged on about why a lot. It's because I feel it's so important to get this right to help drive your company culture and to help carry you through the hard times. Thinking back to the Golden Triangle Foundation, does it need 3 people? That's what I did, but it's not your only option. Take Dante Buckley, the good-looking fella on the left, founder and CEO of Downpour Interactive. He has the skill set to do all aspects of the Golden Triangle Foundation all by himself. Back in 2015, Dante was inspired to make Onward due to the lack of tactical VR shooters in the market. He loved FPS games on console and wanted that for VR as soon as he saw the Oculus dev kit. So he set out how to learn how to code and how to make the game himself by watching YouTube videos after dropping out of university. After a year of development, he was able to release the game on Steam Early Access in August 2016. It became a huge success. He was able to grow his studio to 40 plus staff, become a bestseller on Quest, and do all this without external investment. He didn't have investors to answer to, nor a board to report to. He did it his way. And then his studio was acquired by Meta last year when he was just 24 years old. So major props to him. In short, ensure you can cover off the Golden Triangle Foundation for your game studio, either by yourself or with your friends. So what do you need to get ready before investment? If you've had any level of success in the games industry before, which itself comes from years of hard work, you should be able to use just an investor pitch deck to help raise investment. It'll be a hard and long road, and be prepared for a lot of rejections, but you should be able to. I found the best thing was to get an initial amount of investment from a close supporter and use that as a building block. For example, whilst I was the Vice President of Digital at Dubbit, the game studio focused on kids' games, I built up a great relationship with the board of directors, one of whom, Nigel Dowthwaite, invested £100,000 into XR Games, the very first cash-in. This gave me the confidence to go raise VC investment. Although I kissed a lot of frogs before getting the first VC check, the best lesson I learned was always to have a warm introduction to the investor. This instantly increased how positive the meeting felt. And if you can't secure a warm introduction with an investor, I'm sorry to say you can have little chance of securing investment. So look for mutual connections with an investor on LinkedIn or speak with a friend who has raised investment previously who can vouch for you to their investors. And if you don't have those things, you're going to have to start networking. Initially, I leveraged all the credentials that the team and I had, our history in the game sector, the games we had made at previous studios, the talks I'd given around the world, how I'd been headhunted by EA to lead one of their studios, but instead chose to start XR Games. It's your credentials that merit a meeting with an investor, in addition to a warm introduction and in addition to explaining your why. Equally important is your narrative for your pitch deck. What's your story? You'll need to tell a convincing story that makes sense to the investor. As an example, I'll run you through part of my story for my investor pitch deck. This upcoming section helps to convey the importance of the XR market. So every 15 years, there's a new tech center. We went from mainframes to PC to web to smartphones. So what's next? Well, all the major tech companies are spending billions of dollars believing the next computing platform will be XR glasses, especially as they see this as a primary route to enter the metaverse. And as most of us know, in the book Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, the term metaverse was first used, and it outlines what this future could be like. Talking of which, Facebook have even pivoted, as we all know, their entire business to be focused on the metaverse, hence them being called just Meta. And Tim Cook believes it's the next big thing that will pervade our entire lives. Side note, what I'm trying to get across to the investors is that the future of XR is going to be a big deal. The XR market is forecast to grow at 62% compound annual growth rate to reach $464 billion by 2026. This incredible growth will motivate major console and tech firms to make a push for VR gaming M&A to strengthen their share of the overall market. I mean, it's already happening. My friends at CoachThink were bought by Thunderful for $85 million, and Vertigo Games were bought by the Embracer Group for $115 million. Also, Facebook, Meta have bought many VR studios, including the makers of Beat Saber and Onward. Side note, it's best to show investors how big your overall market is forecasted to be. Now, looking back at the history of deal sizes for Facebook, online, and mobile gaming studios, this table shows us something very interesting. When a new medium emerges, large studios don't put their best 100 people on the new medium. The return on investment simply isn't there to make a profit. This is known as innovator's dilemma, a phrase coined by Clayton Christensen in his book by the same name. So this leaves ample room for startups to innovate. And when the market gains traction, large companies simply acquire the best performing startups to bring those skills in-house. Those are the yellow highlighted rows. But if you look at the white rows, those are the studios that waited until the new medium gained mass market adoption. And look how much more expensive those acquisitions were. They have a B at the end of their exit price instead of an M. Side note, by referencing history and showing data points from the past, investors will easily be able to project the same thing happening in VR. And as it's already happening, it's easy to understand why placing a bet on XR games makes sense. Fingers crossed. Further, according to a Morning Brew Harris survey, US consumers would prefer to purchase XR hardware from Apple versus Facebook by a multiple of 6. This therefore allows us to project that when Apple's XR headset launches, it will significantly grow the overall XR market. Side note, show investors where significant growth can come from. This shows investors that time is of the essence and the need to get in now before it takes off. Now, there's significant and increasing levels of global investment into XR verticals. Previously, we had a lot of hype around VR in 2014, but investors got their fingers burnt, expecting mass market adoption imminently. But they invested too much, too soon, and there wasn't enough VR players to purchase the content, and therefore the ROI wasn't there to be had. That said, from 2015 onwards, we can see increasing levels of investment. All the data points now indicate we're at the slope of enlightenment on the Gartner hype cycle. That's now. But my gosh, back in 2017, 2018, I didn't have the benefit of the slope of enlightenment. I was in the trough of disillusionment, which made it very hard to raise investment. Every time a new medium emerges, the revenue and market size starts small, but it then starts to grow. Look at console in green, PC in light blue, and mobile in red. All three have grown the overall market for games, and although VR in pink is still relatively small, I genuinely believe, along with Facebook, Apple, Sony, and other tech firms, that XR will become the next computing platform. And it's for this reason I firmly believe in the future of XR. And it'll be those XR gaming studios who have been honing their craft for years that will be able to start reaping the rewards when the market begins to take off. Side note, show you understand the wider market and how it will grow by referencing the past. So, the $64,000 question, when will XR go mainstream? Personally, I think in the next 4 to 5 years. In this slide, these are my assumptions of pivotal moments in the XR market, such as the increased adoption of the Quest headset, the key headset at the moment with over 10 million units sold, PlayStation's upcoming PSVR 2, and the upcoming Apple headset, which will significantly help grow the overall market. Side note, show investors that you understand what needs to happen for mass market adoption to take place. Hopefully, these few slides on my What's the Story help showcase how you could do it too. And if you haven't had any previous success in the games industry, you can still raise investment. Obviously, you need a pitch deck, but if you can also provide your investors with a playable demo, which will help increase your chances of securing investment. Don't get me wrong, you'll still need to kiss a lot of frogs, and getting from a demo to a shipped game is not easy. So don't expect investors to be falling over themselves to invest even when you have a really fun playable demo. Side note, when raising investment for your studio, you're hoping to raise enough money to make a slate of games. But while you're trying to do this, you can also pitch your demo to publishers for funding as per the traditional games industry route. The best thing I've found, whereby I'm not having to chase investors and investors are chasing me, is to release successful games. For example, our Angry Birds Under Pressure VR game, which was shipped on time, on budget, and to critical acclaim, made it easier to raise investment in 2019 versus 2017. Whereas when Zombieland VR not only shipped on time, on budget, and won a bunch of awards, and it was a commercial hit, this has resulted in more investors now chasing me. My point is that you'll most likely be raising funding multiple times. Securing your first institutional investor will be the hardest raise you do, but subsequent fundraising should be easier, especially when you've made a hit game. So you raise a small amount of money from friends and family. You use that as a building block to raise a bigger amount using your pitch deck with your why, your story, and your credentials, and then you trust your Golden Triangle Foundation to deliver a good game. And once you get there, you'll have a solid foundation from where you can really scale your game studio. Back when we were doing Zombieland VR, we were doing one project with 20 people in our game studio. That was January last year. Today, we're over 70 staff and doing 8 projects in parallel, and we're just closing another investment round. So, as I say, once you've delivered your hit game, everything changes. Quick side note, if you are fortunate enough to have lots of investor interest, I'd start looking into the investors' values. What are their values? Do they align with your own company values? Can these values be evidenced? Choosing an investor is like choosing a life partner. You're going to be in it for the long haul, so choose wisely. So, what to expect during the process of raising investment funding? During my first fundraise, for every 50 investors that I tried to speak with, I was rejected by 49. That's not a nice experience. So see it as working your way through a sales funnel. 50 investors at the top should result in you being able to speak with around 40, and a solid warm intro will get you into the door. Of those 40, at least 15 should request a follow-up meeting, of which about 6 will take it very seriously, and 3 will write an IM to submit to their IC, of which 1 should hopefully give you the money. When you get to the stage of having follow-up meetings with a potential investor, you really want them to start talking about pulling together an IM, an investment memorandum. This is the doc that the investors need to write to convince their IC, an investment committee, that they should invest in your studio. An IC are the most senior folks in the investment firm who get to decide which investments to make. If the IC meeting goes well, you'll be looking at more due diligence, and then hopefully a term sheet will be received. A term sheet is the heads of terms document regarding key points in the investment, the amount, the percentage equity required, good and bad leaver clauses, etc. And then you can start working on the final 2 key documents, the shareholders agreement and the articles of association. There's a whole bunch of other docs you'll need to provide in final due diligence, but they're all relatively straightforward. So, side note, it's a full-time gig raising investment, and it'll take up to 6 months of your time. And although being rejected sucks, you will receive lots of useful feedback that you can use to iterate your pitch deck. As you begin to explore investment options, you might be tempted to work with an introducer, someone who can help write your pitch deck, introduce you to investors, and charge you a fee for doing so. Personally, I did not do this, but obviously each scenario is different, and I'd recommend speaking with an advisor who can help navigate what's best for you. For me, they wanted paying up front, money I didn't have at the time, and they wanted to know all the investors that I'd spoken to already, which is obviously a side benefit to them because that increases their network. But they won't share all the investors they know. Further, no one can create a better pitch deck than you after you spend weeks on it, and no one can tell your story better than you. Further, each investor you meet today might reject you, but later down the line, when you've proven you've done what you said you'll do, they might invest later. As such, I found it incredibly useful to invest my time doing it myself, as it resulted in a wide pool of investors that know me. So when your work begins to get recognized in public, you'll find that these investors are keen to pick up the conversation. So I definitely recommend sharing positive news stories in the press, on socials, and LinkedIn. It does get noticed. And I really wish I had a corporate advisor when I first started raising investment funding, as I'm finding that they are super valuable. They see deals all day long, every day, just like investors, but they're on your side to help bring alignment across the different stakeholders. What I mean by this is that you should treat an investor as someone on the other side of the table. They want to get the best deal that they can for themselves, not you. Once the deal goes through, you'll find the investor is now on your side of the table as they want the best outcome for your game studio. But if you're raising money again, the investor will then be on the other side of the table again. Having a corporate advisor always on your side will help advise when things are misaligned. Also, hire the best lawyer you can afford. You're going to be going toe-to-toe with your investors' lawyers who will be adding all sorts of clauses, into the term sheet, the shareholders agreement, and the articles of association. So you need someone equally savvy to point out what's fair and what isn't. You'll be pleased to hear that although legal fees can be up to £50,000, you shouldn't have to pay anything out until the deal is complete and the investment funds are in your company bank account. Also, expect lots of questions, so many questions. If you're fortunate enough to receive a signed term sheet, you'll be entering full due diligence. This is when your investors want to turn every stone in your company's history. My advice here is not to try and hide any skeletons in your closet. They will come out. So always be open and transparent about everything when you're in the due diligence phase. As per any relationship in life, if you break the trust, you're going to be screwed. So the final section are the red and green flags regarding potential investors. So it sounds daft, but do your homework. Ensure that they have money. I've wasted time talking to investors who actually didn't have money. They were trying to raise investment funds themselves, and they wanted us to state to their potential investors that they had exciting startups to invest in. Absolute madness. So do your own due diligence. Speak with other startups connected with this investor or any mutual LinkedIn connections. Also, find out the size of their fund. There's no point taking on investment if they can't follow on their money. This doesn't apply to angel investors, obviously, but for the bigger check sizes, ensure that they have follow-on money. This will make it easier to raise more money from the same investor in the future. For example, my current Series A round is only my existing investors, which makes things a lot simpler. Also, listen to your gut. Is it telling you that this person is a dickhead? If so, move on, no matter how much you need the money. Network. How can the investor elevate your business through their contacts? As part of the getting to know you phase, they should be introducing you to folks within their network. Perhaps you get to meet folks who can grow your studio or provide you with a much needed contact at a company you're trying to do business with. Are they founder friendly? Investors who have been entrepreneurs themselves in the past really stand out here. They know how brutal your journey can be regarding the highs and lows, and they want to equip you to shoot for the stars. As such, they might enable you to take cash off the table to help alleviate concerns regarding your mortgage. You'll have to give up equity, though. Equity that should be worth a lot more in the future, so that's up to you as to what you do. Also, speak with multiple portfolio founders of this investor. What do they say about your investor? Are they really founder-friendly? How can they prove they've got your back? This can be evidenced in numerous ways. For example, they set aside 10% of the equity pool or create 10% equity for growth shares, and they want you and your entire team to participate. So the investor is diluting themselves to create this equity as they know it's you and your team that will drive all the value in your business. Growth shares will be on top of your equity as an extra cherry on the cake. After all, if you drive an exit which is 10, 50, or 100 million more than expected, you and your team should be rewarded for the extra upside. And just make a quick note of how fast or slow they are to respond to calls, emails, texts, etc. The faster, the better. Same with term sheets. Can they get there in weeks or does it take them a few days? Trust. As an example might be an introduction to a possible chairperson or to an advisor or a non-exec director. This really stood out to me. The deal might not happen, but they're open to sharing their network and lets you at least walk away with a really valuable contact. No, this is a two-way street, and that same person will be feeding back to the potential investor whether or not you're investable. Sector expertise may or may not be something you want. If it's just money, they could leave you to run your studio as you see best. That said, a sector specialist investor could help elevate your business by creating a network of game studio CEOs for you, which can be leaned on to help you solve hard problems. Reading between the lines. You'll know this when you see it. Watch for investors who can piece together truths from what you've not said. It really does separate the super smart investors from just the smart ones. Thank you. If you'd like to get in touch, please feel free to do so, whether that's on email, Twitter, or Instagram. Thank you very much.
All right, so thank you so much, Bobby. That was a fantastic presentation. Very, very interesting, very thorough. We have some time for some Q&A, so if anyone has a question, please feel free to go up to one of the two mics. And right after this, we have lunch, so no real time limit.
Hi.
Hi.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Just a quick question regarding the list, the flags, the
Yes.
red flags and green flags. What is your, and this may be completely out there, but do you have sort of like a percentage of, let's say you find somebody that you really like and they hit 8 out of the 11 check marks.
Right.
Do you have like a limit to like, okay, they need to meet this many criteria or they need to meet all the criteria in order for you to go with?
Personally, I would opt for an investor who can meet all of those 11 criteria. The reason being, you're going to be with this investor for like 7, 8 years. You'll have your monthly board meetings, but you'll also be in regular contact through the week with them as well. So if they don't hit all 11, you're going to feel the pain for a very long time, in my personal opinion. But it also depends on how desperately you need the funding for your studio. So it's just a give and take dependent on your situation. Obviously, if you've done a success and you've got lots of people chasing you, then absolutely hold out for all 11. If you're earlier in your stage and you really need the funding in, you're going to have to allow less than 11 for sure. Cool.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate that. I think I'm like your perfect audience. I was just absorbing everything that you said.
Thank you.
So my question is about co-founders. And I run into this chicken or the egg type question with co-founders, where I need to raise funds to bring on the co-founders, and I need the co-founders in order to raise the funds. How do you handle that? It's kind of awkward. I'm going through it right now.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it is very difficult, especially if these people are already in full-time jobs, earning decent money, they've got mortgages, wives, kids, partners to look after. It's very difficult to say, hey, come and join a startup, I now need to raise the funding, so we might be 6 months without funding, which is obviously very difficult for them to agree to do so. What I found worked really well was seeking out fellow co-founders and seeking their permission to add them onto my pitch deck. And then when I went out to raise investment, I'd be like, this is my team for once we've raised the funding. So that way it's like a halfway house. But some people may be very careful. Like, I don't want my current company knowing that I'm going off to create a startup. So you'll have to seek their permission, gain their trust, and they'll probably need to run it past their bosses at the company that they're currently at, because the last thing you want to do is kind of add them in your pitch deck and word gets back to their bosses that they're looking to leave. So tricky situation, but by being transparent, open, honest, seeking their permission, making sure everyone's aware, you should be able to leverage their credentials to raise investment funding.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
They're very practical. Just got into the industry like a year ago and kind of learned how to code.
Congrats.
I created my own prototype.
Amazing.
A lot of headbanging for sure on there. So my question is, like, at what point is a prototype good enough to show, or a proof of concept to show to developers? And the second is trying to build out the amount of money that I need to raise. Can you give me some tips on how do I reverse engineering that? Yeah.
On the when to show a prototype, as soon as you've got a playable build, I'd start showing it off to people that are kind of your friends, your family, just to get feedback, to help you iterate it and make it better and better. And I would only show it to an investor when you feel it's good enough, and you'll know it's good enough based on the feedback you get from the previous user test. And essentially you're not wanting friends or family to play the experience in silence and then take the headset off or whatever you're making, and for them to tell you it's fun. You need to be looking for physical cues in terms of them smiling, they're having fun, they don't want to come off the experience, they want to go again. It's these physical cues that you're seeking, and you'll know it when you see it. In terms of how much money you need to raise, it's a very good question. And what valuation? It's basically there's websites such as TechCrunch that show you, so you can look at TechCrunch and you can see other studios, other companies that are from your sector, and you can see their history of fundraisers. So if you're like, right, I'm a team of 5, you can look at other companies at the same stage as yourself, team of 5, you can see how much funding that they've raised and at what valuation. So it's a case of combing through a lot of data and being able to build up a case that you can present to your investors by saying, look, we're worth 6 million and we're raising 2 million and we've got this amount of headcount, and look at all these other studios that were at this position raising this much money back in the day. But it's just, whatever you say to an investor, just ensure that you can point to some data to back up what you're saying. Cool. Cool. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers. Thank you for your time.